Good morning. Welcome to the February 2nd, 2024 meeting of the Montgomery County House Delegation. Today on our agenda, we'll be hearing from the Secretary of Agriculture, Kevin Addix, Senator Ben Cardin. We are voting on one bill, and then we are doing a bill hearing for a late filed bill. While we wait on our special guests, we're going to go ahead and take our voting session the one bill that was reported out this week from any of our local committees. I will turn it to Chair Crutchfield for the Education, Elections, and Housing Committee report.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good morning, everybody. As mentioned, the Education, Election,
I have to log back in.
Committee.
I'm having trouble with my camera. I'm going to log back in. Sorry, Charlotte.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, Delegate Crutchfield, you're muted.
Okay, good morning. As mentioned earlier, the Education, Election, and Housing Committee had a meeting on Thursday and voted out one bill, and it happens to be Madam Chair's sponsored bill, and that is MC 524, and that deals with the Montgomery County Board of Education vacancy procedures and alterations. So the bill alters the vacancy procedures for the elected members of the Montgomery County Board of Education. So if a vacancy occurs on the board 54 days or less before the candidate filing deadline for the primary election that is held in the second year of the vacancy of the vacating member's term, then the remaining members of the board must appoint an individual to fill that spot. And then if the vacancy occurs on the board 55 days or more before the candidate filing, then there's some other procedures that are put in place and held in the second year of the vacating member's term. This particular bill was voted out unanimously by the committee, and so I'm ready to move the bill for a vote.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so moved by Delegate Crutchfield, seconded by Delegate Fraser-Hidalgo, and we have questions, recognizing Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I support this legislation, but I do have a question because I have a similar bill, as many of you know, before the House of Delegates, the Ways and Means Committee, that would have a very similar procedure for filling vacancies in the General Assembly. But it says 55 days before the filing date. I just wondered where the 54 came from.
And Chair Crutchfield, I'm happy to answer that question as the bill sponsor. It's the same, Delegate Foley. We mirrored the provisions in your legislation. So if it's 55 days or more before the filing deadline, then it goes to special election. But if it's 54 or less, then there's no special election. So it's just that part might be worded a little bit differently from your bill, but it is the same threshold. It still is the 55 days before the filing deadline.
Okay, thank you.
Recognizing Delegate Chi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wonder if Delegate Crutchfield, Madam Chair, could you could add some context of what the current practice and what we're trying to fix, especially for newer members of the delegation? It might be helpful just to explain.
Madam Chair, if you would like to answer that.
Sure. Yeah, right now under state law for the Montgomery County Board of Education, 100% of the time vacancies on their board are filled by appointment, 100% of the time. That's what state law says now. That does vary if you look across all 24 counties in the state. There are 6 other jurisdictions right now in Maryland that fill at least some of the time vacancies through special election for their school boards. So really, like, the impetus for the bill is that I think that when you're talking about an appointment for 3 or potentially even 4 years, voters should have a chance to have a say on that. So basically, this bill is just ensuring that voters get that say for when it's going to be a very long appointment. Otherwise, when it's a shorter appointment, the board would do what they do now, which is pick their own replacement.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other questions or any discussion on this bill? And I will point out that if you wish to be recorded as voting, this is a good time to turn your cameras on. Okay, seeing no further discussion, the bill's already been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Wish to be recorded in opposition or abstaining? No, I think that was unanimous. And I'll just pause there just to make sure our staff have gotten everything recorded if they have any questions on the vote. I think otherwise, yes, that bill has passed unanimously, and we can move on. And I see that Secretary Addix is now on the Zoom with us, and happy to turn it over to the Maryland Department of Agriculture Secretary Kevin Addix, and we welcome you back to the delegation this year.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I hope you can hear me. I had trouble connecting, and I'm going to blame rural broadband. I'm at a cabinet meeting in St. Mary's County.
Yes, you're
And
coming
so-
through just fine.
Okay, good. I've been driving around trying to find a good spot. It really just wanted to check in and let you know some things that we've been focusing on and that have been top priority at the Maryland Department of Agriculture, and frankly, just wanted to hear if there were any concerns from you that we could be addressing. I did want to note that our agriculture dinner was last evening, and the Willard family, based in Montgomery County, was inducted into our Agricultural Hall of Fame. And it was a great reminder that Montgomery County is still quite a powerhouse in the realm of agriculture, and Willard has an oversized influence on the broader agricultural industry because they provide agricultural services to many farms. And it's not just in Montgomery County, they're reaching into the entire metro area and up into Frederick County and beyond. And then they've got a location on the Eastern Shore as well. So they are a family and a name and a business that is renowned across the state. And agriculture would not be the same without them. So I hope you can take some time and make sure that they know that you know that they've been inducted into the Hall of Fame. I will say that we've got a couple of top priorities that we've been discussing with our industry. The first is about taxes and the fact that recently the state began taxing improvements on farms as commercial. So if you if you're a farm and you started an agritourism operation, or if you're a farm and you started a winery, all of a sudden within the last 3 years, those began being taxed as commercial instead of agriculture. And we're in discussions with the State Department of Assessment and Taxation about, and you may see some legislation as well. We're hopeful that it can be solved through a regulatory interpretation. Essentially, what's happened is county code, state law has evolved to understand that in order for agriculture to remain viable as an industry, that smaller farms will need to value add their products or value add their experience. And all of the code has been updated except the tax code. And the tax code still looks at agriculture very purely as you grow something and you sell it to someone else to make something out of it. And that of the future of agriculture in Maryland. So Delegate Ziegler, thank you for taking an attempt to fix it. We have some, not knowing where legislation will go, we've got some alternatives in mind that I'd love to brief you and the delegation about. Another thing that is top of our mind is our noble goal, which we will reach, of being energy independent and relying upon clean energy. And the governor has created some very good goals, and the industry supports those goals. One of the concerns that has been raised is that without a discussion about where and how and the density of putting solar on properties, there's a bit of a gold rush happening, and solar developers are looking for the cheapest and most available land, and they're coming in at prices that, frankly, agriculture cannot necessarily compete with. And so we're seeing farms being lost to solar development at 500, 800 acre clips. And while we're also for property rights, and if you're a farmer and you'd like to, or a landowner and you'd like to sell or lease your land to a solar developer, and I want to make sure that it is understood that it's a development. We do not have examples of solar being decommissioned. It goes on the farm. Farming in its traditional sense is not typically viable under a solar array, given the density needs of that solar. There are agrivoltaic options, and those are great if you're trying to power your home or your farm. You get to call the shots. But if you're feeding into the grid, you're turning it over to a solar developer who needs as much density as possible to reach our goal. Our concern is not someone opting to do it. Our concern is that in Montgomery County and in other places, it's very common for a person who farms to farm not just their land, but to farm dozens of farms around them. And if enough of those other farm landowners decided to switch to solar, that farmer becomes financially unviable. And so we do see and we predict a collapse of some farming regions around the state. We've got an example in Southern Maryland where, broadly speaking, large-scale farming is gone, and that's due to development. And what happens is when enough farms are sold to development, the service providers like Willard's leave the area. And so it becomes very difficult for operations. I'll stop there. I see some hands up. I'm happy to answer questions about those 2 points.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Delegate Chi.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Secretary Addix. It's always great to see you and hear your expertise in agricultural matters. Can you articulate what you meant when you said lost to development? Does that mean the land was taken to do what it should be done to, or does that mean the farmers willingly sold their land to solar development, for example?
And thank you for the question, and thank you for what you're doing to support rural Montgomery County. It's great to hear all the discussions about economic development occurring. What I meant by essentially losing land to development, no one's taking land. Okay, so there is a property owner making a decision that for price for whatever it might be, they're making a decision to change the use of that property. And in the industry, as I tried to explain, it's very difficult for certainly traditional farmers in our market where land is so expensive to own all of the land to farm on to become and to remain financially viable. And so they rely on leasing land from neighboring landowners. And in Montgomery County, certainly in the Ag Reserve, and we see this on the Eastern Shore, Kent County, and others, there are almost a predominance of farms that are owned but not farmed by the owner. They are owned and farmed by a third-party farmer. And so farmers have built businesses around farming contiguous land, and they even put their machinery on the road to go to non-contiguous properties. When enough of those properties sell into solar or lease into solar, I keep saying sale, it's a lease, you're leasing it to a developer, it becomes economically unviable for a number of the farmers to farm. And so, we're not coming in to say, stop, don't do it, because we believe in property rights. What we would love to see is a discussion. I know there's some legislation coming in to discuss this. We'd love to see the discussion occur about, are there incentives to put solar in different places? In other words, and I don't think this is going to affect Montgomery County as much as it's going to affect other parts of the state, Eastern Shore, Western Maryland, but particularly we're hearing about the Eastern Shore because land values are lower. Montgomery County land values are propped up just because of the market, and solar developers will have to pay a higher rate to develop in Montgomery County, so they might pick a farm on the Eastern Shore.
Delegate Kaufman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it's very nice to meet you, Secretary Addix.
Good morning.
And
Good to meet you.
we can have a longer conversation offline, but Delegate, a lot of what you do affects District 15, 39, and 14. But Delegate Shetty, Solomon, and I represent a very urban community with, I don't know if there's any farms or very few farms or ag areas. And like at the federal level, there's the ag department not only does ag stuff, but it does um, food stamps, SNAP, and it does WIC, which you guys, I think that's part of the Department of Human Services here. So I was just wondering if you could educate me on if you do anything in more urban parts of the state and what that is. And again, you can give a brief answer here, and then if we need to talk offline, we'll do that. But
Sure. And thank you for that question. So the Department of Agriculture, obviously the primary focus is on farming, but we have a lot of other aspects that we cover. But into farming, we cover urban farming, and we also cover the purchase of local food by farmers. And so we receive some federal funds where we can incentivize through farmers markets and through other programs the purchase of local food by individuals who have WIC, SNAP, and other programs. And one of the things we're very excited about is our Farmers Market Nutrition Program and also the Maryland Market Money Program, which add dollars. They basically add value to someone who's coming in with $1 from WIC. It turns into $2 or $3 if they're buying at a local farmer's market. And that's doing two things. It's helping feed folks who need healthy food, but it's also ensuring that that money is staying in our economy and helping support local agriculture and local food production. Other things that we do that deal with urban suburban on a daily basis, we regulate the flow of gas out of pumps. We regulate every scale in a grocery store. We are looking into regulating not just gas pumps, but electric vehicle pumps to make sure that you're getting exactly what you're paying for. So agriculture, just due to its history and tradition, has been core to consumer services and health and safety as well. We've got mosquito control and a couple of other programs as well that are touching Marylanders in every part of the state daily.
thank you so much. I learned so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's good to see you again, Secretary Addix. And I just want to give a shout out to you and Rachel and your team for how well you've done in terms of reaching out, I think, not only to the legislature, but to the agriculture community. And I did want to note that you did have a very excellent day on solar, agri-solar, and a discussion with farmers back in the, I guess it was the fall. It was really excellent. But I did want to ask, and I learned a lot at that event. The Energy Administration, Administrator Pinsky and others talked about a goal for solar on ag land. I forget what that goal was. Could you remind me? It's a percentage, right, of the solar? Yeah. Do you know what that is off the top of your head?
So in the goal is movable based on
Yeah.
demand.
Okay.
So the goal is tough. Not the goal. The acreage is tough to commit
Acreage,
to with solar. And the other factor is that we hope that solar becomes more efficient, right? So where we may have needed 30,000 acres of agricultural land, maybe in 2 or 3 years we only need 15,000 because the technology has become more efficient and we're able to create greater density of solar. Rachel, do you remember numbers? I've heard recently that perhaps 1% of agricultural land throughout the state, maybe 2%.
Sure. So on that 1%, projection is also based on what USDA and the Biden administration are projecting, that nationwide, in order to achieve renewable energy goals, even though the federal goals are not as lofty as ours are here in Maryland, about 1% is what they're estimating. And those numbers from the solar summit were based on, again, different projections. One of the projections was that in order to meet the goal, we would need to utilize a model that would require 60% ground-mounted solar, 40% rooftop or other pervious surface solar. And with that model, obviously the number of acres needed from agricultural land was lower. But if the state should go with a higher model, which would be more of an 80-20 model, where they would look to put 80% of new solar on the ground, then that's what takes that acreage of potential agricultural land up higher. And so that's where that projection of possibly up to 30,000 acres comes from.
Okay, thank you. And the reason I ask that is I just wonder from a policy perspective, and I'd like to get your view on this, whether it makes sense to kind of cut it off when it reaches a certain point in terms of agricultural land use. I mean, there are a number of jurisdictions, including Montgomery County, that have put restrictions on solar arrays on agricultural land. Anne Arundel's done it, and I just wondered if there was some value to having kind of a cutoff once we reach a certain percentage of agricultural land, that might be a policy consideration for us. I don't know how you feel about that.
I'll just quickly say in response to that first of all, we're pro renewables. We think that this, it's a good goal. We need to get there. When you look at the adoption of electric vehicles, it's slowed a bit, but at some point mainstream will pick up on it and energy needs will, again, skyrocket. Our whole point of bringing this up is just to make sure that we're considering the impacts of it. And of course, there's, what I keep saying is there needs to be balance. Right now, the way the market is looking, much of it will be on agricultural land. And, if we do nothing, the market is going to decide the cheapest land is where it's going to go. And all we're asking for is that conversation. And we've been working, with our peers in the administration, and we're having that conversation. It's a great conversation. But the way the system is set right now, it will be the least expensive land, which happens to be agriculture, and it happens to be concentrated in certain parts of the state. And are there incentives? Are there things that could encourage, a more thoughtful consideration of where solar will go, rather than what it's being described on the ground? It's being described as a gold rush. People are getting calls, 2 or 3 calls a day by energy developers who are, trying to convince landowners to sell. And again, I said it before, I'm pro market. So if somebody wants to do it, that's fine. But just thinking more broadly, zooming out, looking at the food system, looking at, rural business and rural economic development, and just the health of these rural communities. If the land, which right now is sustaining the economy through agriculture, is no longer farming, then what? So I guess I'm here to admit that we're asking more questions.
Yeah.
And I'll note that our next
we have
guest
answered.
speaker
Yeah.
is on
Thank
with
you.
us. So thank you, Delegate Polly. Delegate Queen, if you have one quick question, I think we'll have to cut off our Q&A and then move on with our agenda.
Very much. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you. Good to see you, Secretary Addix. Just wanted to kind of follow up on some conversations we'd had over the interim about agriculture helping us out with our wineries and breweries, which is very important.
We're looking for.
I am wondering if maybe the Secretary's internet
thoughtful
connection has
discussions.
gotten stable again.
Oh, he is in the rural area.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll talk about it later. Thanks.
Thank you for your understanding, Delegate Queen. And I think actually he may have just been bumped off the call, but we will thank Secretary Addix for joining us today. Appreciate his time. And I'm sorry for a couple of folks who are understanding here that we're going to move on with our next agenda item. So with that, I am very pleased to introduce our next guest speaker, Senator Ben Cardin, Senior Senator from Maryland. We so appreciate that you come and meet with us each year. And Senator, we're happy to turn the floor over to you.
Thank you very much for the courtesy. It's great to be with you. I always enjoy, it was great to be on the floor this past week. And I hope that you have a successful session. And I hope that we get to the point where we all can meet again in person for these meetings. As you know, we work as Team Maryland. I work very closely with Chris Van Hollen. I work very closely with the members of the House of Representatives from Montgomery County. We share information, Jamie Raskin, David Trone, John Sarbanes. We share information and try to leverage the best that we can. We work closely with Governor Moore. We work closely with the county council and county exec. Kevin is on this call. I think Kevin is there. Kevin Mack is there, who's my eyes and ears in Montgomery County. Working with Ken Reichert now and then. Every once in a while, I see Ken is still active in the county. So it's good to be with you. Let me just briefly update you where we are in the budget. It is somewhat outrageous that we have not completed the FY24 budget. And we hope to get it done in March. We should be on the FY25 budget. You're enacting your FY25 budget and starting a process not knowing what we did in FY24 and what we will do in FY25. It is a challenge for all of us, but we have a tough political situation in Washington with the House of Representatives unclear as to how they can move any major fiscal bill. We're working on that. The majority leader in the Senate announced that we will be taking up the supplemental appropriation bill next week. That's the bill that deals with Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan, humanitarian assistance, but it also deals with immigration and our border security, which I know there's a lot of interest in Montgomery County as to what's happening on border security issues. I'll make one comment about this. We have a failed immigration system. It's not the fault of President Biden. It's directly the fault of Congress not passing immigration reform we should have done decades ago. As a result, we have a situation where many people are showing up at our border. We don't have the capacity to be able to determine what categories they fall into. The volumes are just so high, and the personnel and resources at the border inadequate to deal with the challenge. The border security provisions, and I'll be glad to go through them if we're successful in getting them passed, would allow for us to have a much more orderly process. We would process people through ports of entry, not coming over our fence. They would get an immediate determination as to whether they have cause to come into this country. If they do have cause, they would then have status and be able to work. We also increase the worker numbers for worker visas. We also have a significant greater capacity at the border to deal with the numbers coming in. So it is a comprehensive approach to try to deal with the current situation at our border. And I'd be glad to go over that. It doesn't substitute for immigration reform. Senator Van Hollen and I have both been working on the TPS bills to give status for those that have TPS and to deal with some of the immediate concerns we have, for example, from Haiti. And we're continuing to work on those issues. In regards to Montgomery County, there are a lot of things that we're very pleased about. President Biden's initiative for infrastructure, for the climate agenda, for our communities, neighborhoods, schools, international competition, have presented unprecedented opportunities. And yes, we want to make sure that the annual budgets are right for our federal workforce and our federal institutions, many of which people live in Montgomery County or facilities are located in Montgomery County. but we also want to make sure we take advantage of the transportation opportunities, the climate opportunities that we have. And Montgomery County has been well situated for this. So you've been able to take advantage of many of these different programs. The Clean School Bus Program, $4.7 million. The money for the BRT, $2 million. You've been able to get the Capital Trails is getting a raise grant of $25 million. So we've been able to advocate because we work together as a team, and we work with the county exec, and we work with the governor, and we work with the delegation. And your federal delegation likes each other's, and we work together. And we've been able to leverage this for more than we would otherwise get. And that's been very true in regards to congressional earmarks that started, I guess it was 3 cycles ago. Montgomery County is in line to receive during these 3 fiscal years over 30 specific earmarks, and we can go through what they are. They go for healthcare, they go for transportation, they go for education, they go for economic opportunity. So we try to help those communities and projects that otherwise would not get the attention that they deserve. And that's done in unity among the 5 members of your federal congressional delegation. So that, Madam Chair, let me pause for a moment for any questions that you might have. But once again, it's been an honor to represent you in the United States Senate. And I am really looking forward to a very busy 2024.
Thank you, Senator Cardin, and we so appreciate your service. Colleagues, is there any questions? You might be getting off the hook easy here this morning, Senator. Well, again, we appreciate the update. Oh, okay, Delegate Solomon, thank you.
Senator Cardin, thank you for being here. I actually just had a quick question for you on the tax package. Appreciate your long service on the Finance Committee. Do you have any update on the child tax credit compromise and whether that's going to make it through the Senate? And then any idea on the state and local tax deduction issue that I know is something we've all been fighting to try to get restored, and we hear a lot from our constituents about that.
Thanks for asking that question. Yeah, there is some, I meant to bring that up. The tax bills which passed the House of Representatives, it's supported by the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. It has broad support in the United States Senate, would provide child tax credit relief for the lower income families. It removes the challenge if you don't have enough income to get the full credit, and it allows for lower income families to be able to get the credit on more than one child, so that the refundable credit is much larger than it is today, taking millions of families out of poverty. It's something we strongly support and we want to get done. It's paired with some business tax relief in regards to R&D and depreciation, but we think it's a fair match. We were not going to let that go forward unless we had something on affordable housing, because affordable housing is the Democrats' top priority. So included in this package is a major improvement on the low-income housing tax credit, which is our largest tool in regards to affordable housing. I'm optimistic that this package may in fact pass. However, tax bills are difficult in the Senate because there are other issues that people want to attach to it. For example, we would like to attach SALT to it, the limitations we have on state and local taxes. The problem is on this is there's pressure from both sides. There are some who there's 3 things going on with SALT. There are some who say, let's leave it alone because the limitations go away after 2025 and we can get the full relief. There's others who are saying, why don't reform it and target it to the modest income taxpayers rather than to every taxpayer to make it more progressive. And then there are some who say, let's get rid of it altogether. So you have pressures on all sides on the SALT issue. If I were predicting, I don't think we'll do anything with SALT this year, but I am in your corner. I am for removing the limitations on state and local. I think it's a matter of federalism. I think you shouldn't have double taxation we all serve the same taxpayers, and we should respect what state and local government does in regards to providing services, and we shouldn't have double taxation here.
Thanks, Senator, and thanks for your work again on the CTC. That's really great to hear.
Madam Chair?
And my apologies, colleagues, my internet has just frozen. Delegate Shetty, Vice Chair Shetty, if you could take over, I'm gonna try to reconnect.
No problem, Madam Chair. I heard Delegate Kaufman. I don't know if you had a question or a comment, sir.
I do, yes. And again, I'll read more about it, but could you go in a little more detail about the immigration package, please?
Yeah. So first, let me say, my major attention is to these local issues, and I will continue to do that. I also chair the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, which is taking a lot of our energy as to what's going to happen on the global side. The most important thing in the supplemental package is the passage of the Ukraine aid. It's absolutely essential we stand with Ukraine. This is the frontline defense. So if I had my choice, I would take the immigration package as a separate package and deal with it in a more comprehensive way rather than dealing with it with the needs of getting the Ukraine money passed. So we have limited options if we want to try to get this Ukraine aid passed. But the immigration package itself has been really carefully dealt with. We think we share a common mission with Senator Lankford, who's been the principal negotiator, and that is to have an orderly process at our border without compromising our values. That is, if someone has a legitimate claim of asylum, they should be able to come to our country and be able to come in here, have legal status during the legal issues concerning establishing asylum, but be protected. But the problem is the numbers showing up at the border, and this is our people saying this, the overwhelming majority of the people coming in saying that are seeking asylum really are not seeking asylum. They're just using that to come into the country because they want to be in America. So we're trying to protect those who have legitimate concerns on asylum, to give them a pathway to come into this country, to have their determinations reached within months, not years, and during that process to be protected and have status and being able to work. And that's not true today. So that's what we're trying to accomplish at the border itself. Obviously, these issues are somewhat controversial. There will be at least 72 hours before we act on any of these bills with public notice. I have seen some of the drafting on some of the provisions, so our staffs are already working on this. It will be released, according to Senator Schumer, either today, tomorrow, or Sunday. You'll have a chance to see it, and we're not going to act on it at the earliest is next Wednesday. So, and let me tell you something. I'm not sure we're going to be successful next Wednesday. I'm not sure we're going to pass it in the Senate, and I'm not sure of its fate if we pass in the Senate, what happens in the House. But I do know this: we have a real mess at our border that we have to deal with. Number one. Number two, we've got to deal with Ukraine. They're in desperate need. We got to get that money out. And three, the humanitarian assistance globally. America needs to step up. This is not just Gaza and Ukraine. There's a lot of needs. What's happening in Yemen today? There's a lot going on around the world on starvation that the United States needs to be party to. All of that's wrapped into this one bill, and I hope that we can get it done.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Kaufman. Colleagues, any other questions for Senator Cardin? Okay, seeing no one else raise their hand. Again, thank you, Senator Cardin. We so appreciate you being here and appreciate your service on Maryland's
Again,
behalf.
thank you. It's a pleasure to represent you in the Senate. And thanks for what you're doing. It's not easy today to serve in public life. We know that people have no bounds in how they interact with us. So thank you for your service and thank you for what you do.
Thank you. And we will turn now to our last item on our agenda for today. We do have a bill hearing that has been for MC 22-24, which has been assigned to the Education, Elections, and Housing Committee. And I will turn it over to Chair Crutchfield to chair this hearing.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Again, this is a bill hearing for MC 22-24, which is the Montgomery County Public Schools School Personnel Training, Religious Discrimination Prevention. Specifically, we will start out with our bill sponsor, who happens to be Delegate Corman. And then from there, we will take testimony from those in support with an amendment, and then those who oppose it. And we will go ahead and start off with Delegate Corman, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, colleagues, and thank you again for the courtesy of accepting the late filed bill last week. I'm presenting MC 22-24. If you look at the bill text, it's a relatively simple bill, perhaps too simple for a very complicated topic. I'll just say, because the speaker gave us a pro forma session today, I had the pleasure of walking Abby to school at Bethesda Elementary. And I think about Abby, as I know you think about all your children. I think about where she's going to go to middle school, which is Westland Middle School. It's a great middle school. My middle school history teacher, social studies teacher, is actually the principal there. So I'm really excited for Abby to go there. But they've had, over the past few years, numerous incidents of swastikas being drawn in different places around the schools. And unfortunately, that's not limited to Westland. And what's also not limited is the type of hate we've seen in our schools, because I know that, Muslim parents think about their Muslim sons and daughters, and people of other religious backgrounds and cultural backgrounds have the same experiences with their children. So a number of us heard from parents during the interim about this issue, specifically the anti-Semitism issues, but I know others as well. And I worked with the other legislators who identify themselves as Jewish in the delegation, and our colleague who is Muslim in the delegation, to try to come up with a bill that was responsive to the concerns we're hearing from our constituents and that we can all see with our own eyes. And so that's the bill that's before you. I will just say that I think other types of training on issues that are similar but not identical to this are also necessary. And I wish MCPS was here this morning to talk more about what they're currently doing, because I know a few years ago they had the anti-racism audit, which led to a training, and my understanding is they are developing that into an annual training. And clearly there are many other communities, racial, ethnic, sexual, other issues that also need this type of attention and training. This bill is limited to anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and other types of religious discrimination. I will say there are voluntary trainings on these issues currently, and I think you'll hear about some of those from JCRC and ADL and others who will testify after me. And those voluntary trainings are important. I think they can be very effective. I know not that long ago, Whitman High School, another example of swastikas being drawn on the school property, and the principal there engaged in one of these voluntary trainings, which I think is a good thing. But I think we need more than that. I think we need more required training. I watched the module that Montgomery County Public School has on anti-bias, and I personally found it underwhelming. It doesn't explicitly mention anti-Semitism or Islamophobia. It doesn't offer case study examples. I think everybody on this call has probably had to do different trainings, whether it's our Maryland General Assembly sexual harassment training or something in your day job. And I think a lot of us can tell the difference between a good training that you're engaged with when you're thinking about the issues, the Black issues, the white issues, and the gray issues, right in between. And I'm using that in the sense of morality, not in the sense of race. And those, require you to really wrestle with the training as opposed to just checking the box. I think we need trainings that require our teachers to engage with the training and not just check the box. So I'll say the bill, as I said, is probably too simple. I think we can all work together to build it out. And I know Delegate Crutchfield chairs the relevant committee, and I've tried to speak to her about how we could begin to start doing that. You'll see from the testimony, both in person and some written, that there's certainly a lot of interest in this area and ideas for amendments. And I think those need to be worked through, and we need to figure out if there's something we can do in this area. I do just want to briefly discuss a few things that this bill isn't, or what it doesn't deal with, because this is obviously on the periphery of much larger topics in our society. But I do just want to say this bill is not about the First Amendment. You can actually say things that are anti-Semitic or Islamophobic or racist within the bounds of the First Amendment. So it's not a question of the First Amendment. It's a question of how we should be talking to each other and treating each other, and what our teachers should be trained to recognize. It's not really about free speech. It's also not about teacher discipline. MCPS has systems for that. Maybe we want to see those changed as well. That sounds like a separate bill to me, but that's not what this bill is about. This bill is also not about curriculum for our students. I know Senator Kramer and many others on this call have been involved in Holocaust education curriculum, for example, and there's been many other topics on curriculum. I think Delegate Acevero has a commission bill on trying to improve student curriculum in a lot of these areas. That's not what this bill is. This bill is about teacher training. I'll also say, maybe controversially, this bill is not about October 7th. This delegation almost a year ago had a very long session with the school superintendent, Superintendent McKnight, where a lot of it was about the anti-Semitic incidents that were happening in the schools a year ago, which is before October 7th. And there have been many other times in our history where different groups have faced actions that they should not face. And the point of this bill is to try to address many of those groups, not just Jews, not just Muslims, and try to make sure that our teachers are getting proper training. I'll just say that I think this delegation is very well equipped to try to take this issue on. Back when I had Chair Polakovich Carr's job, I would rave about how diverse our delegation was: male, female, black, white, Jewish, now Muslim, which we did not have when I was chair, Asian American, gay, straight. I think we have some boomers, some Gen Xers, some millennials, and I know we have some Gen Z representation. So I think we're well equipped to try to work through this complicated issue. But I'll just be clear one more time: the bill is written, despite the wonderful author, is not perfect, and it needs work and it needs to be built out. And I look forward to engaging in that process with each of you, the committee under Chair Crutchfield's leadership, and of course, all the people who are going to be testifying after me and other stakeholders who didn't manage to sign up to testify. So happy to take questions, Madam Chair. But again, I thank you colleagues for listening.
Thank you very much, Delegate Corman. So we'll do questions after the three others testify in support. So the next person up will be Agilia Spiegel. Is she here? Let's see. I do not see Gilia.
Madam Chair, I do see her in the Zoom room, although not currently on camera. So
okay. Okay, thank you. So Gilia. Gilia Spiegel, you may start testimony. All right, then we will go.
Chair, she submitted written testimony if you want to move on.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was about to do. So we'll go ahead with Meredith.
Hello?
Yes.
Hi, I was finally able to unmute. I am
okay.
For some reason, I wasn't able to unmute.
No problem.
I still
Go ahead.
can't seem to start my video. There we go. Okay.
All right, great.
Thank you so much. I apologize. Good morning, Madam Chair and honorable delegation members. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of MC 2224, which would require MCPS to train all school personnel on anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and other forms of religious discrimination. The JCRC's Education Department combats school-based anti-Semitism, advocates on behalf of Jewish students, families, and employees, and promotes safe, hate-free learning environments for all students. School-based anti-Semitic incidents within MCPS had already skyrocketed over the last 2 to 3 years, and the problem has only intensified since October 7th. Over the last nearly 4 months, MCPS has struggled with weekly and at times daily anti-Semitic incidents. In our experience working intensively with MCPS, educators often do not have a deep understanding of who exactly Jews are, what anti-Semitism is, and how it works. And they may have limited cultural competency about Jewish practice, Jewish history, and the importance of Israel to most American Jews' personal identities. This last point is especially crucial in effectively tackling anti-Semitism occurring as an outgrowth of the current Israel-Hamas war. In 2022, the JCRC partnered with ADL's Stellar Education Department to develop a comprehensive 3-hour training, thus far presented to over 1,400 MCPS educators, that includes core education about Judaism, the Jewish people, and anti-Semitism, as well as hands-on experiential components. We also provide customized programs, such as a training for MCPS restorative justice and mental health professionals on intergenerational trauma among Jewish students and faculty, and a training on post-October 7th anti-Semitism among younger students, co-led by JCRC and American Jewish Committee, for teachers at Bradley Hills Elementary School, which had experienced a serious anti-Semitic incident. The JCRC strongly believes that MCPS employees should have a baseline competency in all the forms of hatred that are significantly manifesting in our schools, both those that are religiously based, such as anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, and otherwise. Standardized mandatory training would foster a minimum baseline of competency across the school district, providing an improved foundation for responding to bias incidents swiftly and effectively. It would send a clear message that combating anti-Semitism and Islamophobia are top priorities rather than merely a side issue. To be sure, this required skills development should be a floor and not a ceiling. Implementing mandatory training should not diminish the necessity of more in-depth training, such as those provided by JCRC, ADL, the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, and others. It is no easy task to disrupt a cycle of bigotry that involves perhaps the world's oldest hatred, anti-Semitism. We must move from reactive responses to proactive cultural change. And at the end of the day, it is the principals and teachers who set the culture, behavioral norms, and sense of shared community within each school. This bill will empower educators to respond more effectively to a problem that has only continued to worsen and which ultimately diminishes the entire school system. We look forward to working with Delegate Corman and others on this bill, and we urge the delegation to give it a favorable report.
Thank you so much, Ms. Siegel. Next, we will hear from Meredith Wiesel.
Good morning. Thank you, Delegate Crutchfield and members of the delegation. You do have my quite extensive written testimony. I know it is quite long, but I wanted to make sure you have the full details. I'm going to echo a few things that Gila has focused on. So first of all, ADL is pleased to support this testimony in strong support of MC 2224. As you've already heard, the bill requires certain trainings for MCPS, and we're talking about faculty here, to have a better understanding of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, other forms of religious discrimination. With the rise in not just, I would say, anti-Semitic incidents, but hate crimes in general that are impacting many of our religious communities, it's really important that this bill sends a clear message to our community that schools will have the tools to push back against these trends. When MCPS faculty does not have an understanding of something like the history of anti-Semitism, how it manifests today, or just honestly the elements that we see leading up to these incidents, they can't fully grasp the significance of the bias and bigotry, and also just the lasting impact of hateful words. Yes, hate speech is protected speech, but we still have to understand the impact it has on the community at large. And as Gila noted, since October 7th, we have seen anti-Semitic incidents skyrocketing. 2022 was already the highest year on record since ADL started tracking data. And since October 7th, we have seen the number of incidents, what we're seeing in calendar years. I really just want to highlight some of the things, and this is in my testimony, but I think it's important to hear verbally of what we're seeing in our K-12 schools and why our faculty needs to be equipped. School-based harassment incidents in 2022, there were incidents that included one-off statements like, "You Jew, why don't you kill yourself?" Or when a student shouted in the middle of a math class, "If anyone celebrates Yom Kippur today, you can die." We are seeing harassment incidents and vandalism, not just things like swastika, but vandalism incidents that have said things like "kill all Jews," 6M, meaning 6 million, oven, "Hitler was right, Jews not welcome." And since October 7th, that has increased tremendously. As Gila noted, ADL has been incredibly proud of the education work. And yes, it's been voluntary, but we have trained thousands of faculty in MCPS, and we have worked in lockstep with JCRC. It's a full 2-day professional development for K-12 educators. It helps them understand Jewish life, classic anti-Semitic tropes, modern day manifestations. It explores how we're seeing anti-Semitism showing up in our classrooms. The other session that we also do looks at how participants can identify anti-Semitism in the community. And for all these reasons, it's important to remember behind every hate crime statistic, there's a person, a family, a community who is dealing with something unimaginable. And hate crimes and bias incidents have a lasting impact. For these reasons, we ask for a favorable report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so very much for your testimony. Next, we have Mohammed Khalil.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mohammed Khalil. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this matter. I was going to keep my comments brief, but I sit on a board for a nonprofit called Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, and they're a think tank for the American Muslim community, and they sort of compare our community with other religious communities. And in 2022, we did a study about school discrimination, and Muslims students were the highest percentage to report school discrimination, followed by Jewish students. And then what was surprising from that same study, was right behind peer-to-peer bullying was faculty and school administration, who was the second most or the reason behind the Muslim students school bullying was the administration. So that was just like something we didn't expect, and out of that we developed a toolkit and have presented to several school administrations on just training. So I don't know what the capacity is these days for us offering that training, but I did want to share that is a potential resource if we decide to go there. And again, that organization is ISPU, or Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. That's all I've got. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Colleagues, are there any questions? I see already that we have a question from Delegate Wu. I'm sorry, Delegate Wu.
Thank you, Delegate Crutchfield. I just really want to applaud Delegate Coleman to think about this, propose this bill. I would say it's so important to think about how our school students are educating our young kids. And the world is very diverse, and the world affairs sometimes, unfortunately, impact the affairs in our local communities, and even really far away. So by understanding the complexity, or even a lot of tragedy happened before, really help our teachers to educate our kids. I think this is definitely a very important topic. We should never forget, and let the teacher understand the complexity. When they reach out to the kids, I think that will be really helpful to make kids, when they're young, they know the complexity and have the sympathy, which will help bring the community together. I remember when I was on school board, I asked some teacher about teacher training, a lot of what we call professional training. And a lot of topics never been touched. One example, not just about Jewish or Islamic topics, but even about the topic of Asians. I said, are you aware of any Asian related topics? There is many of you really not aware, even name Asian American figures from a historical perspective. And I would say it's so important for schools to design a good professional training, which will touch every aspect of the community, which will bring the kids together to have that sympathy and create more harmony in our community. I would really think if we can amend this a little bit to include like Asian hate, which had been so much rooted over the last several years, unfortunately, and that would be great to amend that. If Delegate Coleman can agree, I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Wu, and I appreciate your experience in this area, having been on the Howard County School Board, and obviously the personal experience that you were just hinting at there. Listen, it's in the hands of the delegation and the committee, and as I tried to say in my testimony, I recognize there's other types of trainings that I think are needed. whether that's this bill, a separate bill, whether we need a sort of broader look at the issue. I'm very happy to work with Chair Crutchfield and the committee on, because I do recognize, as I tried to say, that there's many other types of issues that I think we need much better and mandatory training for our teachers. So thank you for the suggestion, Delegate Wu.
Thank you. Okay, I see next Delegate Miracle North. Did she drop off?
She's on mute, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Sure how that happened. Okay. I think I got the hand down, but not the unmute. Okay. As I was saying, when I was muted, thank you, Delegate Corman. And of course, Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to ask this question. But thank you, Delegate Corman, for your leadership on this bill. And I appreciate the opportunity to flesh this out a little bit more. What I was hearing throughout all the testimony left me a little bit confused as to what is defined as school personnel. I heard teachers, advocates, administrators, but from what I've experienced with my own child experience as a first grader, it can be on the school bus. It could be with the para-educators, it could be at recess. So perhaps this is maybe a question for the education committee, but I think it's important to flesh out and define who school personnel is in this bill. The second thing I wanted to just flag is making sure that we are clearly defining religious discrimination. I'm a Christian, and my daughter's a Christian, and so we've had conversations of being in public school and talking about Christianity, because there are moments where she couldn't do that. And so if I read this bill to her and I see 2 categories already pointed out, but the rest is other, how can I explain to her what other means? And so maybe just a conversation as to how are we going to lay out the various religions to consider in order making sure that we're fulfilling the intent of this bill, and I'm including Buddhism or any other religions that are practiced in the county. So those are my thoughts and my questions on the bill. Thank you.
Delegate Corman, would you like to comment?
Sure. Thank you, Delegate Miracle North. Actually, I would have to defer to you in the first instance on whether school personnel is a defined term in the education article. I don't know off the top of my head. It may already be defined. But I agree with you in your broader point that we need to maybe target who we're trying to have, the training experience by, for sure. In terms of the other forms, I agreed. I mean, part of the reason we included the other forms was because there are many other religions and different incidents happen at different times. And then there's also different world or national events that spur certain things. So I didn't want it to be limited to just anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, but I also recognize that I can't list every religion under the sun. So happy to further sort of flesh out how that should be described in the bill.
Thank you, Delegate Corman. Delegate Queen, do you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, the sponsor, for bringing this bill. I do think it's important for us to distinguish between religion and race and color. So I'm glad that you're doing that. My question sort of is, was there any thought of this? And if it gets too much into muddying the water, I'd say not to do it. But the use of religion, how people misuse religion for racism. So I think about the KKK and the burning of crosses, with the cross being a symbol for Christianity. Is there thoughts about talking about that? And that's a yes or no, and that could be something we could do later, but that's one thought. And then the second question, as it relates to Delegate Miracle North, as I was listening to this and you talked about other religions, I tried to Google what are the top religions in the US, and they do list what they call the big 5. So you may want to think about that in ways of couching some of this. That's all.
Yeah. Thank you, Delegate Queen. I mean, I'll just say I personally, as a progressive or liberal Democrat, struggled a little bit with the religious discrimination wording because it is used to undermine, for example, certain healthcare rights that I think most people in this delegation believe people have. So I do think there is something to the concern you've raised. not entirely sure how to address it, to be honest with you. But again, I think it's one of the things that we need to kind of flesh out here.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Weisel, usually we don't have.
I just wanted to answer.
If you have a comment, that's fine.
I do.
We're going to comment
think,
to any of the questions.
of course, yeah, it's related to a couple of the questions. I think
Sure.
that there is a potential way, and I think the committee should explore the way our current hate crime statutes are as it relates to religious discrimination, where they talk about protected classes. There is language in there that specifically looks at when it's a religion-based hate crime or religion-based hate incident. That is probably, as a recommendation, as somebody who's worked on the hate crime laws, for you all to look to start on that, and that potentially will help flush it out.
Okay.
Thank you, Delegate Crutchfield.
No problem. And does anyone else have a comment? Any of the folks that testified have any comments to add to the discussion? And any other questions from my colleagues with the first panel? Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to those who will provide testimony in support with an amendment. And the first up is Ann Rubinovitz.
Yes, hi. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of MC 2224. I represent the Montgomery County Jewish Parents Coalition. I'm also a lawyer and former MCPS teacher and MCPS parent, and I support this bill from all these perspectives. The MoCo JPC is an all-volunteer group of dedicated parents committed to combating anti-Semitism within MCPS. We greatly appreciate the assistance and support of the bill's sponsor, Delegate Corman, the bill's co-sponsors, and the staff. They and other local leaders have generously given their time to meet with us, resulting in the bill now before you. There's little debate, as we've heard, about the sharp rise in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia nationally and locally in the wake of October 7th. MCPS has been a particular hotbed for expressions of religious bias, as you've heard. The question for us now is what to do about it. It's MoCo JPC's view that rather than solely responding to individual instances of bias, we need to lower the temperature within our schools through education. An amendment proposed by MoCo JPC will better enable MC 2224 to accomplish that goal. The amendment contained in my written testimony has two purposes. First, it requires that training resources be allocated in proportion to the forms of religious bias appearing most frequently in the school system. A data-based approach is important to ensure that the training received by educators and other school staff emphasizes the religious biases impacting the greatest number of students. Second, the amendment calls for training materials to be based on definitions of religious bias previously adopted at the local, state, and federal level. Without this key provision, curriculum development will be slower and impacted by possible ambiguity regarding the intent of the bill. Finally, the bill as written requires that MCPS consult with representatives of the affected communities in developing and implementing materials. Given past MCPS challenges in responding effectively to religious bias, this provision is key to achieving the bill's goals. To summarize, I support MC 2224 with the offered amendment as an important pathway to stemming religious bias in the Montgomery County Public Schools. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Next, we have Paula Benefeld.
Hi, yeah, I'm Dr. Paula Bienenfeld. Good morning, delegates and Madam Chair. I'm representing the Montgomery County Jewish Parents Coalition, JPC, and also the Parents Coalition of Montgomery County. I'm here on their behalf to support Bill 2224 with an amendment, as Ann spoke about. First, I want to say thank you to all the delegates and their staff and senators that we spoke with along the way to get the bill as far as it has. And a special thank you to Delegate Corman, who is, in fact, my delegate in District 16. So thank you so much for sponsoring the bill. I also want to thank everybody who offered to co-sponsor the bill as well. We had many conversations with different delegates and senators to get the bill over many hurdles, and we realize it's early in the process, but we have deep appreciation. As many of you know, the intent of the bill is to redress a question of equity in the Montgomery County public school system. It began when, as members of the APC, we were involved in the MCPS work sessions on the anti-racist audit and work that MCPS promotes. At each session, we asked for anti-Semitism to be included in the audit and teacher and staff training, and each time we were told no. This bill is an attempt to remedy that lack of equity. It specifically requires MCPS to implement mandatory training on anti-Semitism. As you all know, the number of anti-Semitic incidents, as Meredith has already talked about, especially in our public schools, has increased dramatically over the past few years. The anti-Semitism comes from both teachers and students, and as the delegate said, from other staff members. So the bill, I believe, is to include staff as well. You heard directly from students during our testimony at the priorities hearing last November. Jewish parents have pulled their children out of MCPS. Other Jewish parents are afraid to send their children to MCPS schools. We cannot have that. We cannot have anti-Semitic teachers. We have to really put a lid on this. And this bill goes a long way towards that with the required mandatory training. So we support this bill. And as Ann has said, we ask for the one amendment to strengthen the intent. First, that resource allocation be based on data from law enforcement, hate crime, demographic specific incident statistics. And second, that the definition of each form of religious bias be consistent with definitions we've already seen from the County Council, the state of Maryland, and the US federal government. So our amendment is in my written testimony. Thank you again. I also want to say a happy new year to Delegate Wu and to all the delegates on the call. Have a good, prosperous new year. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Next, we have Embereen Khan.
Madam Chair, I believe, if I may, she said that she didn't receive the Zoom link. So my team has been trying to get it to her.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll go ahead with Zainab Chaudhry and then come back.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much, Chair Crutchfield, Delegate Corman, members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to testify in support with amendments on this bill. My organization, the Council on American Islamic Relations, is the nation's largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization. And part of our mandate is to address and report on the bias incidents that impact our communities. And according to our data and research, over 50% of American Muslim children report facing hate bias within the public school system from their peers and also from educators. So this is definitely a very critical bill. And especially in the rise of heightened anti-Semitism, it's very critical that any legislation also tackle that as well. My organization believes that it's also very important, especially in this political climate, that we address many other communities that are being adversely affected by the hate bias within our society, especially within our school systems. Over the course of the last several months, between October to December, our organization in Maryland alone has recorded almost 300 incidents of hate bias targeting Muslim and Palestinian, Christian and Arab students. And I think it's especially important that we center the humanity of those communities that historically have been marginalized and erased from our society. And to this end, one of the amendments that my organization wants to raise is that any training that we support through our school systems include training that addresses the experiences of these children. We have heard and spoken to children who have said that they are afraid and terrified to share with their peers that they are Palestinian because their identity has been weaponized within the school system. Jewish children deserve to feel safe. Muslim children deserve to feel safe. African American children, Asian children, LGBTQIA children, every single child deserves to feel safe within our schools. And any legislation that we believe addresses hate should encompass the humanity of all of these children. We also want to clarify who the training would be conducted by. We believe that it's important that any training that is conducted within our school systems be from reputable organizations and entities that have credibility and that do not further exacerbate the experiences of other children within our school system. So we believe this is a strong bill. It has merits, but there is opportunities for improvement. And we appreciate, again, Delegate Corman, your leadership on this. And all the co-sponsors who have supported this. And we look forward to providing additional data, resources, information, insights, and perspectives from within our particular demographic and our communities to help strengthen this bill. I would definitely recommend that the sponsor reach out to Palestinian Christian Alliance for Peace, which is an organization based in the DMV area that specifically centers the experience of Palestinian Christians, because we have been seeing a tremendous uptick in the number of hate bias incidents targeting those children as well. Thank you so much for this time and this opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much. And has Ms. Khan arrived yet? I don't believe so. Okay. All right, our colleagues, are there any questions for our three folks that provided testimony? Okay, I don't see any. Delegate Wallach, do you know if Ms. Khan is close by or still available?
So I believe, thank you for the question. I believe that the Montgomery County delegation was organizing the Zoom, and the Zoom links were sent to everybody who signed up through the delegation. We just made sure from my team to follow up with people who identify as Muslim, just to make sure that they had the link. So we were sort of the secondary.
Okay.
I'm not sure
okay,
if she has received it or not. We just try to follow up on our end. So if you can confirm, Madam Chair, if it was sent to her, that would be most
I don't
helpful.
think she's coming. I'm sorry. I just texted her and I think she said she was going to, thank you for allowing me to talk, but I think she said she was going to send in written testimony. So I didn't want you to take any more time on this, and I appreciate you looking into this. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the update.
Yes, and thank you. As a matter of fact, you are the last person to testify today, and you are testifying in opposition, and that is Ms. Cagri. Is that? You can go ahead and begin your testimony.
Thank you. First, thank you, everyone, the delegates, for allowing me to testify. I appreciate you giving me the time. My name is Ilhan Kagri. I'm the co-founder of Muslim Voices Coalition, on whose behalf I speak here. I'm a long-term resident of Montgomery County and reside in Silver Spring. Muslim Voices Coalition opposes Montgomery County Public Schools school personnel training for religious discrimination prevention. While we appreciate the good intentions for its conception, our members feel the focus of this bill is misplaced for the following reasons. First, this bill is only for Montgomery County. It usurps the authority of the MCPS School Board and the County Council. Furthermore, why only Montgomery County? If such legislative measures are required, they should be statewide. For example, we know that much of anti-Jewish sentiment is propagated by the far right. Why not propose training in schools in parts of Maryland that lean more right-wing than Montgomery County? Second, in making reference to Islamophobia, the bill ignores both Christian and other non-Muslim Arabs who are also victims of the recent surge of hate incidences, bullying, harassment, firings, and doxings. Third, both anti-Semitism and Islamophobia are real. The problem, however, is who will define these terms. For example, the IRA, International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, includes criticism of Israeli policies. Under this definition, speaking out against the horrific offense we are witnessing in Gaza, the starving and indiscriminate killing of an entire caged-in population, would be deemed anti-Semitic. I want to add here that my mother is Jewish, and I grew up celebrating Jewish holidays and observing Jewish traditions. I have relatives who are Israeli. This fact should not and does not prevent me or other Jews, Christians, or Muslims from speaking out against the ongoing genocide. This bill fails to address the actual issue, the weaponization of anti-Semitism. People who are speaking out are being attacked, including being shot or stabbed. In Montgomery County, we've witnessed attacks against women wearing hijab and students being bullied. Demonstrators calling for a ceasefire in Rockville, Maryland, were harassed by an aggressive group of counter-protesters holding Israeli flags, shouting, "We will kill you, we will rape you, we killed your brother in Gaza, we will kill you too." There are videos of this incident. A 14-year-old girl was publicly flyered as an anti-Semite with her name and picture on the flyers because of a private Instagram post about Palestine. Aside from the distress this caused her, her life was put at risk. Finally, it seems to many in the Muslim community that this bill is noise signaling more than anything else, for Muslims at least. It is part of a general larger strategy to pat Muslims on the head, pretending to actually do something about the antagonistic environment they and their children are currently living in. On the contrary, many Muslims and Christian Arabs and Palestinians see this bill as a tool for silencing the outcry over the onslaught in Gaza, which has resulted in more than 27,000 deaths, 11,500 of whom are children. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And colleagues, do you have any questions? Okay, seeing none, I believe that concludes the testimony on this bill, MC 2224, and I will turn this back over to Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chair Crutchfield. And as I mentioned at last week's meeting, this bill will go through the regular process now. It's been assigned to the Education, Elections, and Housing Committee, where that committee will take it up at a future meeting. Committee chairs, are there any announcements about future meeting dates? Chair Love.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the Land Use, Transportation, and Public Safety Committee, please keep noon on Monday on your calendar. Things are still happening on MC 1124 and MC 1224. We may end up not having the meeting, but for now we are having that meeting. So please keep it on your calendar for noon on Monday. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Chi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to say the Economic Development Committee will have to have another work session, hopefully a very short one, to continue our conversation and just to wrap it up and hopefully make a final decision on PGMC 11224 related to the Office of the People's Council on Land Use. So please stay tuned and look out for email. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Crutchfield.
Yes, and the Education, Elections, and Housing Subcommittee, committee will actually meet again this coming Thursday. So please make sure to keep your Thursdays at noon free for the meetings. We will have standing meetings every Thursday at noon. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will note that Metro Washington Area Committee at this time still does not have any new bi-county bills. We're still waiting to see what comes over potentially from Prince George's County. So there are no active bills at the moment for that committee. I think that is it in terms of official announcements. Any members of the delegation have any announcements before we adjourn? Okay, seeing none, everyone enjoy their Fridays. We are adjourned.
Ralph, I missed the vote at the beginning. Is it still possible to be marked in the affirmative?
Madam Chair, that's your discretion.
I'm sorry, Delegate Vogel. We have only been allowed people to vote who were in the meetings, and maybe we're having some technical difficulties.
Okay,
You'll be marked
understood.
as excused, though.
Thank you so much.